Sports and the news world. Let's now make sense of the news of the day, which is the budget as far as the 2025-2026 budget is concerned. Remember, you can be part of this discussion. Send us a message and your comment on 22047. We will sample some of your views towards the end of the program. Just a reminder of who our panel that has patiently been with me in studio are CPA Benedict Omolo is a member of the Institute of Certified Public Accountants. Davis Tayo is the Managing Partner, Africa Social Financing Center. Nicholas Cairo is the Associate Director, Tax and Legal Services. Rafael Maruri is a Certified Public Accountant. Nicholas, before we went back to the news, I asked you of if this was a household budget, would it be a bad economics for the household owner?
Definitely, we are bad economics, keeping in mind we have a deficit of almost 1 trillion out of a budget of 4.3. Well, out of a budget around 4.3. So we are looking at 25% if you are looking vis-a-vis the budget. If you go ahead and look at the revenue, we are having estimated revenue from of around 3.2 trillion. So if you are to look at the shortfall, it's quite significant, and it will reach a point whereby we'll have to either source money either through borrowing, or we have to sell some of the parastatals for us to fund this budget. Do you think if you are doing it year on year as a household, can you survive year on year with such huge deficits? No. You will have to either to curtail your expenditure or try and rope up or increase your revenue, which I think we are struggling increasing the revenue, so it means we have to curtail our expenditure.
Davis, Cairo is hinting as though this is a household living beyond its means.
Yeah, I will cast not a judgmental perspective, but an analytical perspective. I see this household as having two main interested parties. First, you have the neighbors who are wondering, is this household stable? And that seems to have been the preoccupation of the leaders in stabilizing the macroeconomic conditions of the country, making sure that our debt repaying capacity to our local and international obligations are stabilized, stabilizing the exchange rate, just making sure that the country has regained its status. What I'm seeing now in this budget is now a deliberate move from the macro now to the micro. Because I think during the break we were asking ourselves, these good numbers we are talking about, where are they? Because we are not seeing money in our pockets. I think this next phase is a very deliberate effort to put money in Kenyans' pockets. And I can just mention a few things which I've seen, like the Climate Works program is literally going to put money in the pockets of people, because they'll be employing people to do all these slashing jobs, cleaning the rivers and all those kind of things. We are seeing some enhancement in the Hustler Fund. We are seeing some enhancement in the social safety net monies, an increase in that. We are seeing a very bold statement. In fact, those were some of the first words CS Mbadi said, that NHIF had 8 million members. SHA now has over 20 million members. And by God's luck, if that program works, with the way tunasema wa Kenya, truth of God, it will put money in people's pocket, because it will be good to go to hospital and be taken care of. So there are a lot of ifs. And then see, time will tell as we go on. If we
Benedict, Davis hinted at my next question. Often Treasury and policymakers point to figures to paint a rosy picture of an economy that is growing. But to the Kenyan watching this, who is the economy growing for?
I think we've got to ask ourselves, what has the CS put in the budget that could help us? I would agree with him. I think what the CS mentioned was the pending bills, which they were going to pay. And specifically, they were going to start with micro and small enterprises. I think that makes sense, because when we look at the statistics, we have about 7 million SMEs, and we have about between 14 to 17 million direct beneficiaries of these SMEs, that will be something which will then start enhancing liquidity. And so the pending bills payment has got to be done. I was a bit surprised that of the portfolio they received, only about 50% look legitimate. Now that's a very big issue, and I hope that his proposal for the e-procurement will help us. The other thing which he brought out that I think was positive is a treasury single account, because you then have got a lot of government entities that have got a lot of money. They are cash positive, yet the other side of government is borrowing money. So they're doing TBs, so they're basically borrowing from the bank. It doesn't make sense. So this treasury single account could help sort out a bit of this problem. My final point, which I would agree with him, and I hope that they would be, how would I call it, aggressive on this, is the parastatal, he called it the state corporation reforms. Now, in this one, if they're going to go to the government-owned enterprises, I think we have got to move away from where chairmen and CEOs are rejected politicians. That won't work, because these parastatals need to be cash positive. They need to generate, especially the government-owned enterprises, they need to generate positive cash, and they need to generate good returns. Of course, it's through service delivery, and so that has got to be worked on. And so you've got to look for competent people who can actually manage these enterprises. That will help in terms of trying to put money and liquidity into the economy, and people may start feeling some positive sides. But just to mention, I tend to have a concern with some of the projects we do, like the climate work for youth engagement, perhaps could work, but I think some of the proposals we are giving today are for the previous period. We have had free primary education for the last 20 years. We have young people who are educated. Now, when you tell a university graduate to go slash, I mean, there's no meaning. I mean, it's futile. So we've got to sit down and come up with things that give these young people meaning.
And Benedict, you mentioned of the pending bills.
Yes.
Basically, companies and individuals who have done businesses with either the national government or the county government who have not been paid over a period of time. But what usually is the effect of that to an economy like Kenya's, where you see the numbers, though the committee is still verifying these numbers, are sky high?
I mean, the impact is that it basically just strangles business. And so if I don't get paid by government, perhaps I borrowed, I've got to shut down my business, I've got to lay off employees. So the ripple effect of not paying is quite a challenge. Now let's think for a moment, and I didn't hear him bring it very robustly. Let's talk about the universities. Now, when the public universities are all collapsing, and they cannot even remit statutory returns, we are talking about a very difficult situation. And so we've got to look at this, because the moment the universities start struggling, it means even the students there are struggling because they're suffering. Lecturers are not being paid. They're always out demonstrating or doing one thing or the other. We have got a ripple effect of a challenge. So I think that the pending bills can only be resolved by better financial discipline.
When the chief economic advisor of the president, David D, says, for instance, that doing business with government is not sustainable, it's not the wise thing to do. Your comments?
Government is the biggest consumer, and so government must actually spend, and then the rest of the economy goes. I think the government must have the discipline of paying for services rendered. That must be the principle. Yeah.
Okay, Raphael, perhaps the question I earlier on asked Benedict, the economy is growing, at least to Treasury, to the numbers that are reported, but who is the economy growing for? Is there a disconnect between the figures reported and, as they say, proverbially, qua ground?
Probably different. I think what we are looking at is numbers that are being displayed by who and what we are saying. The World Bank says that our economy will grow by 4.5%. When you go to Treasury, they're saying that you're going to grow by, the central bank is saying you're going to grow by 5.2%. So it also depends who's giving us the numbers. which numbers can we trust? Do we trust the World Bank numbers, or do we trust the central bank numbers? That's a big question that we need to ask for. When my friend here says that some of the programs that CS proposes, the Climate Works program, the Hustler Fund, the question that comes to mind is, how are they rolled out? The other day we had the CS cooperatives, weekly for Paranya, saying that they are writing off 5 billion of the Hustler Fund because they don't know where that money went to. When now we come to the climate programs, Climate Works program, how is it going to be rolled out? Is it well thought? So I think we're also rushing into programs just to praise and talk about putting money into the people's pockets. And one of the things that we've been lacking in the last couple of years is that the weather conditions have not been too bad. So we've been having harvests that have helped the economy sustain, regain some vitality. But now, when again we roll out programs, the fertilizer program, and some people are taken to court because of giving people subsidized and some things that are not really fertilizers. What are we talking about? We are shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think if we need to put money into the people's pockets, we need to look at some sectors of the economy that really work for the real people. Agriculture. I mean, everybody farms. And if we can be able even to put up even a value addition into these agriculture issues, we are putting money in people's pockets. Yesterday I heard in one of the media houses, some people in Kirinyaga actually threw out milk because KCC could not take up their milk. The MD KCC was coming to apologize to them that this thing will never happen again. Or else some dry seasons we don't get this. So we also need to look at the value addition. And I like it when he says that when you ask a university graduate to take a slasher and slash around the road, for how long can the road be slashed? You know, these are the hard questions that we need to ask.
Better a coin in the pocket than none in the pocket. Is that not the justification for us?
I agree.
By the regime.
I agree, but what we are saying is this throwing stuff into the tokenism, so to speak. When you look at what happened the other day, in Thika, I think 45 million was spent. Somewhere in Rift Valley, 45-something million was spent on borders and what have you. How many people can you give?
Fair enough. We will come to the use and the misuse of taxes. Taxpayer-KRA is at the heart of these numbers. The bulk of this money, evidently an expectation from collecting in as far as taxes are concerned. KRA, for the last at least 5-6 years, has not met its target. And the targets have, on annual basis, been increased. What is the logic, in your view, behind increasing numbers that increasingly are not met?
Yeah, and it's one of the key pointers I know the minister alluded to. So he said going forward, there'll be budgeting based on the growth, expected growth, and stop coming up with fancy growth projections. And this year, they have tried to moderate in terms of their projected growth, in terms of the revenue, especially what has been allocated to KRA to around, is it 2.7 trillion thereabouts, which is at least reasonable compared to instances where we were projecting rates of 20% or more in terms of revenue growth. Looking at KRA, they have a tough task to grow or to collect the 2.7. I know they have been given, can you say, through tax administration, some extended powers to them to be able to collect this money. But issue is, with the expanded powers they have been granted, will they be also fair to the taxpayer when they are collecting or coming to collect the taxes?
Davis, the budget evidently avoids new taxes, at least as per the presentation by the Treasury CS, but focuses on compliance. Given the level of non-compliance, given how vast the sources of these revenues are, is it realistic to rely on compliance rather than introducing new taxes?
I think there was no way the government was going to even try to introduce new taxes.
Why so?
No, I mean,
I suppose you are referencing the last finance.
So there was no way they were going to do that. So we had to look for a way of raising these funds and meeting these demands by the Kenyan citizens to support development and the recurrent budget. So making sure that the tax base is expanded, by use of technology, use of, just encouraging people to comply. I think that's the attempt that is happening here. But I was happy when he mentioned that even for the development projects, they're going to lean more towards PPPs and making frameworks which will enable that to happen even more. But I want to have a slice of the pending bills pie.
Fair enough.
As a retired banker, I want to bring a correlation. These monies that are pending, and Omolo mentioned it very well, that the traders borrowed money from banks. Okay, so these are pending bills in the books of MSMEs, but these are non-performing loans in banks. And if you see now what is happening in the economy, the treasury bills and bonds, and that's where the government borrows, the rates have gone down to 9-point-something%. The NPLs are still at 17.2%. And that's why the banks cannot reduce the lending rates. Because for every 100 shillings that I lend out, statistically, I expect to lose 17.2 shillings. So I cannot lend then at 9.5%, 10% and all that. So making payments, clearing the pending bills will unlock credit from the banks to the SMEs. And I want to encourage government to really focus on sorting out the pending bills, because if that is sorted out, the AGPO program, for example, that reserved procurement for 30% for women, the youth and all that, will experience a surge, because right now no one wants to touch that program. And that's why maybe we are going to climate.
That's on the question of pending bills. There are some who have suggested criminalizing pending bills through legislation. Will that work?
It will not work.
County governments and national governments should not carry forward and procure goods and services that they do not have the ability to pay for.
It won't work. Kenyans are clever. They justify all these things they are doing. And if you go to those pending bills, there is a reason that there is no delivery note, the invoice is not stamped, all these things are there. So there must be a deliberate effort. And largely, that was what was happening during Kibaki's time. Government was paying. Long are the days where we used to see a list of LPOs reported lost, because holding an LPO from government was like money. But now, no one wants to touch, especially the MSMEs. So sorting out the pending bills restores confidence by, all these small businesses to take up contracts. That creates employment. It's more sustainable. It's a more sustainable way of injecting money into the economy.
Benedict, this budget is financing both the national government and the county governments. There are some who have cited duplication of roles, be it at the national level or the county level. Some have questioned the use and misuse of monies allocated to the counties. Is this system of governance, in your view and generally, sustainable from a financial point of view?
Yes, it is. I think we cannot run away from devolution. Kenyans wanted devolution. Devolution must work. I think we have got to revisit some of the devolved functions and whether they are funded adequately. That, for me, seems to be the challenge. If we take a matter like agriculture, which the national government is proposing the either 78 or 47 billion, I think he talked about it. Agriculture is fully devolved. And so in my view, that is money that should just have been given 100% to the counties. And therefore, you then only leave national government with policy in terms of where they want to put in some emphasis. And the better economy was very clear in terms of the value chains, the leather, cotton, dairy, edible oils, tea, rice. They would then look at that and be very, very clear, develop the policies, allow the counties to then implement based on different counties. Take an example of health. Again, with the CHVs, which the national government is supposed to supplement. Why don't you just give the full amount of money to the counties? Let them do it. Hold them accountable. He talked about infrastructure, I think, for hospitals as well. Just give it to the counties and manage it.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of things which, in my view, we need to ensure that there's a reasonable sense of money following the functions. But just coming to the issue also of the pending bills, we've got to look at the issue of the cash flow, because sometimes the counties don't get funding at the right time. And finally, I know the CS talked about the county government revenue raising bill for the own source revenue. A lot of the levies and fees that the counties would charge can only happen if the SMEs that are on the ground are working, because what else do you charge? It's basically levies and stuff like that. So we've got to see the whole connection of our budget, and therefore be able to ensure that the revenues and the cash is robust. But a couple of counties, because the cash comes in very late, you have a lot of pending bills. So I would not criminalize it, because at the end of the day, you would be sending somebody to jail who has got no ability to influence the ability to pay on time.
We're talking of the counties and the amounts they receive, and more importantly, the amounts they collect.
Yes.
When situations are, as the Auditor General and the Controller of Budget have pointed out to, some counties raising less, using more on their own travel, where do counties then find the balance of what to appropriately use in the rights of the people whom they lead, and what others have termed as globetrotting, for instance?
I think the whole issue here is around discipline, frugality, how we as leaders would then manage the resources to see whether they are for the benefit of the people. I think, and going back to, I think one of your earlier questions, you see, Kenyans have got no problem paying taxes. We generally have got no problems. If you remember, during Kibaki's time, when we started doing our tax returns, we would take them to Uchumi, and we would all declare. There was no problem. Now, the issue was that we could see there was a correlation to services. We could see some things were happening. And so that is what we've got to look at. And so going back to your, an earlier question, we need to be very clear what could be basic services that everybody receives, like basic education. In my view, should be completely free. Let's get rid of all these bursaries. Basic health, we should be able to access it anywhere. When things like those are available, then we have got no problem paying taxes. But if they are not, that's another matter. But when it comes to wastage and I think the National Assembly, the county assemblies have got to then come out more strictly in terms of the findings of the Controller of Budget and the findings of the Auditor General.
Yes.
Because when they go to Parliament, Parliament must be able to, or Senate, must be able to robustly interrogate and then ask. I think in a couple of, I think the courts are trying, because on some of these corruption cases, they are now asking you to pay 3-4 times of what you took. So we need that kind of discipline. If it was a wasted trip, can they refund?
Raphael, we talked of KRA and the responsibility it has, the huge task in raising these amounts. There were attempts to rebrand even KRA for a perception change from KRA to KRS.
Yes.
Just on the question of perception, is there a mistrust between the people feeding the cow and the one milking the cow?
There's a big problem. When you go to the SMEs who form the bulk of the business community in this country, when a KRA issues a summon or issues anything, those of us who in practice, you receive calls from your client, wamenitumia ile kitu. So it is like a summon to court or something. So there is no that relationship that the KRA is supposed to be serving its people, the Kenyan people. Sometimes they just need some clarity, but a normal businessman in the community, when they see something from KRA, if a KRA officer enters into a business, just identifies himself as I'm from KRA, it's a panic mode. We've had that as practitioners out there. So there's that, a lot of mistrust is there. So until that is rebranded, I had the privilege of sitting in a meeting with some representative of KRA just the other day. And one of the things they're telling us, they are trying to be more customer oriented. They were asking us as practitioners and the people in the ground, how can we serve people better? But when you get to the ground, there's a lot of sensitization that needs to be done. And I think also internally, looking internally, training their staff to know that they are service and not an authority, quote unquote, because they've always taken themselves to be an authority.
Well, KRA equally relies on the honesty, degree, and lack of it of the taxpayer, isn't it?
Yes. I think what we need also to agree as Kenyans, even the sensitization and the way we've been oriented as a people. When he talked about corruption, the corruption is the giver and the receiver. So we need also to look at us internally as a people. As we demand these things, what are we saying? So we need to get to that point where we look internally even as a people. As an SME, am I paying what I'm supposed to be paying? If I'm doing that and someone comes, I'm happy to go and present my books. But again, when we look at the SMEs and we are comfortably saying they form the bulk of our people, how many people maintain their books? How many people maintain their books? So that is the biggest problem we have. I would also comfortably say, when you look at KRA and its staff, are they well staffed? Well staffed in terms of numbers and the people they need to serve. Today you go to a KRA officer, he or he has been allocated 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 accounts to man. So this person does not have the time to look at my account, understand my business, and also meet the targets that have been assigned. So that is a big problem. And if you allow me, I wanted to delve into the PPP that the CS alluded to. When these PPP are done, where is the public participation that is warranted, that is guaranteed in the Constitution? Look at what happened with the Adani deal. It was a PPP, but because of lack of public participation, we, the public, could not understand it. Even as we go to the to say that these development projects will be done by the PPP, are we doing enough to sensitize the public? The other thing I want to say is on the PPP and the budgeting, I think the professional bodies that are there, ISPAC, Body of Engineers, LSK, all of us need to be involved so that it doesn't become a heckling event when these things are called by the politicians. One last thing I wanted to say on the devolved functions and the funding, there is what, before a budget for the county is approved, there is what they call own revenue. So they must demonstrate how much they are correcting. You find during the budgeting, the county government used to be there, he can confirm, they would exaggerate what they anticipate to correct so that they can have their budget approved. This is where now we have budgeted corruption from the word go. So we need to look at counties and the reality of what they can correct, other than just throwing numbers here and there and saying this is only revenue correction, no target.
Fair enough. Cairo, let's talk of austerity. There were promises of running a lean and mean government. There are promises to cut on the number of appointments that the president himself was making. He very publicly last year at such a time promised to reduce the number of advisors. I think the media has independently verified that has not been the case. The number has increased. What stops discipline in as far as austerity and austerity measures are concerned?
I think it's a reflection of our society just being frugal and also taking into account the discipline, what we have been articulating earlier. Because as a society, we should look at, we have made a promise and we say we'll be frugal or we'll try and cut down in terms of advisors, but you are not sticking to it. Unless you justify, maybe for example, there was an issue here, or it's a critical item that needs to be addressed by maybe certain personnel who we don't have in our current portfolio of advisors. However, based on also keeping in mind the political patronage that you have to take into account. So you'll find it's normally a push and pull because I need to reward my people, whereas also I need to ensure I have, I keep my promises, but it appears that political patronage pays more than compared to keeping the limited number of advisors.
Davis, for the viewer probably wondering, hearing of Kenya's appetite for borrowing more, can one run a government without borrowing? Externally, at least?
You can. And I want to stretch this hope basing on what we have started now, the zero-based budget basis. It's then possible to work within our means, because even in managing our households, you start by asking yourselves, what is my income? What do I have? And you have to work within that. Secondly, the only way there will be real tangible effect of what government is doing in the economy is if the development budget is absorbed optimally. Because the recurrent budget is just salaries and the normal things. So in economics, that will be K, yeah? That one is there. Whether you do whatever you do. But when roads start getting constructed, then money goes to the population. So we must focus on the absorption of development budgets. What is making counties, and today in Parliament, as Mbadi was tabling the budget statement, even the report from the control of budget was being presented, evaluating the 9 months of last year of how counties spend their money. And it was shocking that on average, the development budget absorption is at 26%. So we have a budget with very good targets, allocations and all that. But how far will these projects be implemented? It's not about money being available. What is the problem? Is there no capacity to process the procurement laws? Is that the challenge? So that needs to be taken care of so that the promises of money in people's pockets is realized.
Benedict, the Kenya Kwanza administration quite often publicly faulted the previous regime for overborrowing. Many equally point fingers to the Kenya Kwanza regime, saying they are equally borrowing.
Yes, I think that is a challenge. I think the control of budget recently mentioned they've done about 780 billion, I think, in the last 9 months. So that becomes a problem. And the issue for me is, can we be disciplined? If we go back to the household or personal finance principles and apply them to public finance, can we scale back? The issue is, can you scale back? Because the only way you end up with a surplus or have a formula to retire some debts, it must mean that you scale back certain things. And this can only be done, this was actually the last budget which he could be able to do that. Because the one for next year, as we are approaching election, is a very different situation. So this one would have been a good one. I think, in my view, the CS could have lost something because he had two opportunities with a zero-based budget to just say we are starting afresh, and to be able to say, I need to retire some debt. 1 trillion of interest just does not make sense. So there was that opportunity, which may be a challenge. And yes, we can be able to have debt-free or deficit-free budget. But just coming back to what you asked, Raphael, the Kenya Revenue Services, I think one positive thing that the CS mentioned was that if you get an assessment from KRA, they are now supposed to give you reasons. And I hope the reasons will be understandable to you, the person, as to how they have come up with a new assessment or an adjustment to your tax liability. So I think they may be able, if this gets passed, they may start serving us better.
Well, remember, you, the viewer, the taxpayer equally, in this case, can be part of this discussion. The hashtag to use is TV47 News. Send us a message on 22047. We are making sense of what has tonight become Kenya's largest budget, 4.29 ambitious budget. Let's get back to Raphael. Raphael, just a reminder, is a certified public accountant. We are talking of discipline, both from the national government and the county government. We're talking of discipline from the political class equally, isn't it? If you are a KRA Director General or a top KRA official, and you see the amount of money politicians, rightfully elected, are dishing out weekend after weekend, would you be concerned?
Yes, I would be concerned. It's a very big concern. And I think before we got to the broad-based, it was something that BAMBA would always talk about, where he said that somebody's salary is slightly above $1 million. I could manage to give $1 million every weekend. So I think the shoe now is on a different, the board is on a different court now. But so to speak, it's worrying to see the tokenism that is happening with our politicians. They become gods and goddesses for the common person, and that is not right. I struggle to understand why somebody would do a public meeting on a weekday and expect the stadium to be filled or the public spaces to be filled with young people who are jobless. So this tokenism relates to what you're asking me about being a KRA person, whether you'll be concerned, because the question is, where are you getting this money? Does your tax return, is it in correlation to what you're giving out? So it is a very, I think it's a fertile ground for the chairman and the commissioner for KRA to look into. And like we said, we must look internally. The parliamentarians, even after we get to the tokenism and the kind of money they are dishing out, look at what happens during campaigns. He said that next year it will be so different because you get to the campaign period. Even the money they use, we want to understand whether the lifestyle audits and the wealth declaration forms that they do, are they real things or are just pieces of paper? So it's a very interesting space to look at.
Cairo, this regime hinted at a change in ideology from what they termed as consumption to production. How much of that, in your view, is reflected in this budget?
We have seen they have continued pursuing the production approach, and the best one should be the agricultural one. We have seen they are going ahead and subsidizing fertilizer just to ensure the agricultural sector continues performing well. I know we have been lucky in the last couple of years. We have had sufficient rainfall, and hence the production or the harvest you are getting is quite good. As well as we can see, they are also factoring we have seen money being pushed for the leather tannery just to ensure we continue facilitating some of the, manufacturing, especially like tannery, and also we have seen some being allocated to sugar, just to ensure we continue catalyzing the agricultural sector as well as the small-scale manufacturing area. They should continue the same, focusing on production and cut down on the consumption. But as we are heading now to election years, what you have pointed out, it will be a tough balance for the government.
Davis, the debt ceiling has quite been moved. In the last, I believe, 10 years, more than 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
From absolute numbers to now a percentage of the GDP.
Yeah.
Is it a question of discipline?
It's a discipline issue. It's a faith issue. Increasingly, you hear our friends saying, we found this thing, so what could we do? But you're there, you need to handle it. I'm seeing a deliberate commitment to just do something, move the needle in that. There's a lot of cry about the transparency, the debt register and all that. There's a commitment to do an audit, a local audit, and even to subscribe to the Commonwealth Register, which makes sovereign debts public to the international market. So again, another if. If it happens, it's a good thing, because that transparency then will start shining the light towards our leaders. And you see, when transparency increases, accountability has to follow. So it's something.
Just to interject at that point.
Yes,
in this case, Parliament was the one solely responsible for raising the debt ceiling.
Yes.
Legally.
Yes. But again, you see, you find yourself here with dollar-denominated debt. The exchange rate moves against you. And when you value the debt, it moves. Of course, when it moves in our favor, we clapped for ourselves and all that. So I'm saying it's a mix of discipline and faith. Previous governments have borrowed. You have to repay. As you repay, you have to, some you're rolling over. The demands from the citizens are there. So what do you do? So there's an opportunity, there's a deliberate thing. But if it happens, it will move us in the right direction. There's also an effort, because this percentage is pegged to the GDP. So the mathematicians in the house would say, you can tamper with the denominator or the numerator. So there's an attempt now to grow the GDP so that you collapse the percentage and say now the base is bigger, so whatever debt we have is within the limits. So all these things are happening at the same time. So let's see what comes out in the next
Benedict,
year.
for a GDP of conservatively 16 trillion shillings, with a debt of talks of now 11 point something trillion shillings, that sounds like a danger.
Yes, it is. And I think the CS addressed himself to it. He mentioned it's at about the debt to GDP ratio at 64%, but it would come down. I think he mentioned 2028 to the 55%, which is the target. But I think we have got to ask ourselves, where was this debt applied? Because the law requires that when we borrow, the debt is supposed to go for development activities. And so the matching, we've got to ask ourselves as accountants or finance people, you've got to match. So you borrowed, give us the ledger. This is what you borrowed. What were those development activities that you are supposed to invest in? And perhaps this is where the disconnect is coming in. If they had, and maybe some of this were borrowed with good intent for long-term investments and long-term thinking, and those projects were supposed to have generated cash to be able to pay, but they were misapplied, then that gives us our problem. And perhaps that is why the register is very tricky, is neither here, because there's an office for public debt. Then there's the Auditor General who is supposed to check these things. So for us
what we have borrowed and how it was used.
Correct. So for us to be then saying now, audit now, this should be something which should have been there throughout. And in any case, I think then the National Assembly or Parliament should then have been asking themselves, or at least perusing through that register before increasing the ceiling. That's just prudence.
Fair enough. We are reflecting on Kenya's largest 4.29 trillion shillings budget, 2025-2026. Time for us to take a short break and equally pay the bills on our end. We'll be back with this discussion after this break. Stay with us.